swag vibe, baby.
Welcome to the Cup of Joe Show, where we explore the journey of recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. One story, one conversation, and one step at a time. I'm your host, Joe, creating a safe space for honest discussions about the challenges and triumphs of addiction and alcoholism. In each episode, we'll hear inspiring stories and uncover tools that make healing possible. Sobriety is not a one-size-fits-all journey, and you don't have to face it alone. Recovery is possible, and it's worth it. Thank you for joining the Cup of Joe Show. Now let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Cup of Joe Show. I'm your host, of course, Joe. And today I'm honored to introduce Jeff W. Jeff's been sober since May 27th, 2016. He's married his wife, Anna, 2 years into sobriety, and together they're raising an amazing blended family that includes his son, Michael, who's 19, his bonus daughter, Zoe, who's 20, and his bonus son, Lawson, who's 17. Jeff is deeply committed to physical fitness, and for good reasons. Early in sobriety, he made a conscious decision to reclaim both his body and mind after years of addiction had taken their toll. What started as a necessity became a passion. Running, hiking, biking, weight training, anything that supports a healthy, disciplined life. Jeff's story embodies what is possible when someone chooses recovery one day at a time. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. Hey, Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm great, Joe.
Hey, man, thank you so much for your willingness to come on the show.
No problem. I appreciate the opportunity.
So what was it like growing up, Jeff?
Well, I always describe, the community I lived in Birmingham, I describe it as sort of the Sandlot life, just a lot of neighborhood kids. And man, we're always playing sports and, scuffling, fighting, this, that, and the other. And it was, just good times. And in our community, on the weekends, college football is pretty big around here. And growing up, there was old thing called the Iron Bow, and our whole community just came together and barbecued. And as a kid, I lived very close to the Birmingham International Airport, so the Goodyear blimp would be coming over at certain games, and it was just that's what I remember the most.
Now I have to say, now are you an Alabama or Auburn fan, Jeff?
I'm an Alabama fan.
Okay.
But I'm one of those that, hey, I'm going to pull for our state. So I'm going to pull for Auburn at times, and I'm going to pull for the SEC. So I'm not many people say that.
Yeah. No, I completely understand too.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm in Knoxville, so and a graduate of Tennessee, so I have to say go Vols.
Absolutely.
But I have a lot of respect for Alabama. A lot of respect for Alabama. So what was kind of the relationship of alcohol or drugs around your family? Was it common, or was it not so much, or what was that like?
Not really in my household. My dad was a blue collar foundryman, and he had a pretty strict regimen, and he's in the bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock, up at 3:30 in the morning. And occasionally at times I saw my dad drink on the weekends here and there, but in our family, he had two brothers that died of alcoholism. One of them was a murder suicide, and the other one, just alcohol just tore him to shreds. And and I, growing up, I had a childhood friend moved in. I guess I was about 5 years old when we had some neighbors move in, and that's where I wanted to stay on the weekends. And it was just totally different than my household. We could stay up as late as we want, and there's all sorts of things going on. His father was full-blown alcoholic. He dabbled in a lot of other things too. But I just remember as a kid, I thought, man, he's living the life. And, and it was just like, I wanted to do the things that he did. I just thought that was the funniest thing. I didn't, my friend and his sister, they didn't think like that. They were put in some real tough situations, and at times my parents had to, help them out. And I didn't see that part of it. I just saw, hey, your parents are cool. And, that was my take on it.
It's amazing. We kind of don't see the big picture until later on, and I'm sure looking back, you recognize some of this stuff. But do you remember when you first felt the effects of alcohol?
Absolutely. I was 12 years old. I was raised in private school up till the 5th grade. Both my brother and sister. I've got a sister 11 years older than me and a brother 5 years older than me. And the airport was going to be expanding. So the last 2 years, we're waiting on the city of Birmingham to purchase our house so we could relocate. And so I talked my parents into letting me go to this public school that was right next to our house. All my neighborhood friends went there, and, it was just, and they decided they would let me. And man, that's where things really took a turn for me. I was introduced to things that I just, in 6th grade, it was just families that, hey, they're selling drugs in the school. Kids are bringing beers to school. And man, I sort of just fell into that. And the first time, alcohol and other substances took effect, that I got into skateboarding, and we're hanging out with these guys, us 12, 13-year-old kids, hanging out with these guys that we thought were, cool. They're 18, 19-year-old hanging out with 12 and 13-year-olds. But there was this one of them had a skateboard ramp at his house, and we were going to camp out. And man, big plans. There's going to be alcohol. There's going to be marijuana. There's going to be all these things. And so our parents agreed to let us stay. They didn't know all of our plans, but, and I had a sponsor. He said, I didn't drink in the 1st grade, but I sure could have used one. And I could really relate to that. I always live with such angst, and just, there's times I'm that egomaniac, and then it's, the inferiority complex. And when alcohol took effect, by one of the speakers I listened to, he said, I lit up like a Christmas tree. Man, I had a psychic change. I had a spiritual experience as a result of that. It was just like all these things in my brain, and that I felt like may fire at times. It was just like everything was flowing. I was a new man, and what I know today is I had an abnormal reaction to alcohol,
Yeah, that's fun. That's the way you put that was really like right on. And I always used to say that, alcohol made me powerful and helped me manage my own life, and it really did.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how did it progress, like in high school or after? Was it getting where you becoming habitual, so to speak?
It did. It was just like every time I had the opportunity from that point forward to drink, I drank. I sort of, all I thought about was, when's the next time I'm going to be able to do this? With that, we camped out that night, and I woke up that next morning. I was wearing these red jogging pants and this white T-shirt. And man, I woke up well before any of my friends had woke up, and I had urinated myself in my sleep, and I had vomit all on this white T-shirt. And I had to grab my skateboard and skate through a couple of miles to my house and walk in my parents' house on a Saturday morning, just humiliated. And looking at that, and that's what, it's what alcohol and drugs did for me, just the humiliation. And, but all I could think about is, man, that was fun. When am I going to do this again? So it progressed on to, in high school, there were sports, there were parties after the sporting events, and it was, a weekend thing. Back in those days, my parents gave me $5 and $4 of that went to a 6-pack of beer, and we're going to end up at a party. I'm going to be diving into other people's coolers and stealing or whatever I could. And, and I had $1 left. I'd hit there was, back then there was a little, diner where 3 hamburgers for $1. That's how I'd hit that 3 hamburgers for $1 on my way home to try to sober up before I got home.
Man, it's funny, like when you're saying I remember when there was like dollar beers and 10-cent wings, and those days are gone, man.
Yep. Absolutely.
So what were some of the lies you told yourself kind of in when you were active in addiction and drinking?
Well, thinking back, one of the first things that comes to mind is, I was really good in sports and football, and I was really small, but I was good at football. Football was probably my talent, and baseball was my passion, but I just wasn't as good at baseball. One of the first lies that I think of is how I convinced myself I needed to quit football. And, and what that did was it left a lot more time. I started drinking through the week, on the weeknights, especially, rather than being out there on the field playing football, I'm sitting up in the stands drunk. And, and it progressed on into, hey, I can quit when I want to. I just don't want to. I never really, it took me a lot of years to understand the delusion that my mind was under from the disease, No,
I totally get that. Did you experience any trouble? Did you have any consequences back then, or?
Well, I used to think at the age of 21 was the first time I really suffered any consequences from alcohol. And it was when I experienced my first DUI. After some self-examination and looking back on my past, I understood, I had a 4-year relationship in high school. It was my last 2 years of high school and the first 2 years that I was out of high school. And I'm going to tell you, I suffered amnesia when at some point after so many beers, and I'd forget that I had a girlfriend, and I'd cheat on her or, with her friends and tell them lies and just, I hurt a lot of people. And there were other relationships that it was just, selfish, self-centered, and it's just like, hey, I get so intoxicated, I forget things, or I don't care if I hurt anybody, and this is what I want to do here and now. And so those were some of those consequences. But as a result of that, not knowing how to deal, one day, she wisened up and was like, hey, she kicked me to the curb, and I didn't know how to deal with that. I did it through, trying to blot it out, and through drugs and alcohol. And during this time, it was really just alcohol. And, I was coming home. I was out with some friends in Birmingham and coming home in a blackout, 5:30 in the morning in Hoover, Alabama. And I come to in the Hoover City Jail on Super Bowl Sunday, 1996. And, I asked them, I said, hey, what am I doing here? And they said, well, you ran over a man on the interstate. And this was not my first time driving drunk. I'd driven drunk many nights. And, I thought, well, I finally did it. I'm going to be in prison for the rest of my life. And 24 hours later, when they allowed my family to come pick me up, I found out I did run over a man. He was parked on the side of the interstate and reading his map, heading down to the coast. And I totaled out his vehicle and my vehicle running 80 miles an hour. And that one, as a result of that, I can't remember. I had a dear friend. He become a spiritual mentor to me for the next 18 years, but he was one of those that he pointed me in the direction of recovery. And so as a result of that, I went to my very first meeting. And, I walked into this meeting on a Sunday night, and I'm 21 years old. All I can think about is I got this open bar wedding at some really nice country club here in a few weeks. Now's not the time to be quitting drinking. And, I'm beat up black and blue from this car wreck. And, and I always like to share this because it was really something powerful. And I guess I had this guy needs a step one meeting, and so topic was step one, and they went around the room, and I was the last person to share. I was sitting right as you opened. I sat as close to the exit as I could, and so that put me the last one to share. And I said, I said my name and just what I am, and man, I just started bawling, crying. There was something powerful about me uttering those words that I've got a problem with alcohol. And, I remember getting a few numbers, and a couple of nights later, one of those guys reached out to me, and I said, man, I appreciate the call, but, that's just not me. And it was me. I just wasn't ready for it,
Yeah, no, I get it. Can I ask what happened with the car accident or with the?
So the guy was okay. He did receive medical treatment, but he was not injured that bad. And as a result of that, it was high risk insurance for the next 5 years that, I didn't take any responsibility for. My parents, God love them. They bailed me out so many times, and I never felt consequences for a lot of the things that I had done, and with good intentions.
No, I also had a parent like that who helped me, man, just saved me, and unknowingly probably, saved me from consequences I probably needed.
Yeah.
But you never know. I think we're here right now as a result of everything we went through, and it was just the way it was supposed to be.
Exactly.
Were there moments when you tried to quit and you realized you couldn't?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't long after that DUI accident, and I was sort of on. My parents sort of had me on house arrest in a sense. They just, hey, you don't need to go out, and I was just like, hey, I'm going out, but I'm not driving. It was just I had to get out and have a drink. And, and it was, I justified, well, I'm not driving, so it's okay. And I ended up a few weeks later, I made it to that one of my good friends, very nice wedding in that open bar. And I ended up getting into a fight and getting kicked out, just to a degree, sort of wrecked his wedding. And, those were the things that just continued to happen to me when I'm drinking.
So what was, and I'm just trying, what was like one of the lowest points? I mean, as you're, what are you like, probably in your early 20s now? I mean, it progressed because it took a minute to get sober. So,
Yeah. And I remember seeing a therapist, and, it was amazing. Anytime they start writing out a prescription, I would immediately start feeling better. And it's just miraculous. But, it within 6 months after that DUI, I decided, me and a buddy went up to a university up in northern Alabama and decided, hey, we're going to quit our jobs and we're going to go back to school. We're 21 years old. We've only had maybe a year of college. We've been working and trying to start a career. And that was my solution to it. Hey, I need to recreate my life. I need a geographical change. And so that's where, the first, I come home and I con my parents. I was like, this is the answer. And they funded it. And, and I'm sure I made many bargaining things that, hey, I'll have a job, I'll do this, that, and the other. And I did that for a while. The first year was just, man, I made good grades. I really became passionate about what I was studying about. And, things were good. I was still drinking periodically, sometimes mainly just on the weekends. And I got this really good job in a gym, and started working at a gym because that was sort of the path I was wanting to take as a career. And I met this girl, and she convinced me, hey, you need to quit the community college. You need to come to the major university over here, and you need to join this fraternity and this, that, and the other. And I was like, okay. And that's what I did. That was another, I would go to my parents, hey, this community college, I want to go this route, and it's going to cost you this much more money. And man, I was just a con man. And, and that's where it's really started going downhill. And I was just surrounded by, it was just the first semester I did really good because it was required in order to get into this fraternity. I had to have a certain GPA. And then it was just the next 2 semesters, man, my academics just went down. And at this point, alcohol had quit working. I mean, no matter what, it was just, it never did work. And I was introduced to other things, and it was just like, hey, I found the old feeling again. And that resulted in me going on to academic probation. And basically at this point, I talked my parents into buying a home up there, and I had roommates and to help pay for the mortgage and all that. And now I'm failed out of school, and I've called my parents, and I landed back in their basement again. And I didn't really realize how bad I was when I came back home, because man, it was just, I had to have a drink every day. I was smoking marijuana just to help me get to sleep at nights. And it's funny because I used to slip out on Sunday nights out of my house and go for a ride, and I would pass by this old clubhouse, AA clubhouse, and I'd just scoff at those people sitting out there on the porch smoking cigarettes, and and not knowing someday I might need a group like that. And and it did get worse. I moved back home, and at this point, my mom dealt with a lot of chronic pains, and she was a walk-in pharmacy. of all the medications she was on. And one day on Christmas Day, my girlfriend had come over. I guess it was about 1999. And I opened the medicine cabinet and I was like, what's Oxycontin? And at this time, Oxycontin, it was new on the market, and that's what they were treating my mom with. And I took a 20 milligram Oxycontin, and I fell in love. And over a period of time, and it's like I heard one of the best ways I've heard it put, I kept lowering my standards to match my behaviors, and I started, my crowd changed, and I started hanging out with people that were introducing me to other things, and I became a IV drug user. I was whether it be the Oxycontin or a lot of times it really didn't matter, just whatever I could find. And for about 4 years, that's what I did.
So what was the turning point for you? Or was it, or I guess the period of time that was a turning point for you, if it's anything like me?
Well, and for many years, I kept doing the same old things, geographical change. If I could just meet her, I just need a wife. And I ended up, I went back to church, and I was like, that's what I need to do. I need to go to church. And this local church that I went to had a little recovery thing going on. And so I met some people, and it was really my first attempt at recovery, I would say. And I'm at church one night, and there's this girl, and I'm 27 years old. She's 20, and she's saying, they asked her to open up in prayer and for this event we're at. And I thought, man, that's the one. So I, took another hostage, and it was just like, people in the church told her, you need to get away from him. And she had the mindset, I think she heard, you need to save him. And she attempted to save me and help me for, we dated for about a year and got married and stayed married for 11 years. And we, before we ended up in divorce, and during that period, I was really sincere. I just didn't know really, hey, I can't just have one drink. I didn't know these things. It was a long, those 11 years were just, or most of those 11 years was just like, hey, periodically I'm going to break into my parents' house and get something to feel the way I want to feel, or I'm going to sneak a few beers. And so the turning point was we were still married, and she called a treatment center, and things were bad. It was really bad. If I didn't have so many amphetamines, so many opioids, and so much alcohol on a daily basis, I couldn't get up and support the family. I couldn't hold down a job. And I was really just down in the gutter, and she found a treatment center, and it was really where I was reintroduced to recovery in a different way. And, I come out of that treatment center, and I made an attempt, and I did all the things that was suggested of me. And I'll say this, I was doing the best to my ability. So I thought, I call it my half measures phase, but I'll do this, but I'm not going to do that, and it's just, I'm still sitting on the fence. I'm still interviewing this thing. And, it was one of those things that, I was 6 months sober. The day before I would have picked up my first 6-month chip ever, since 12 years old. I was batshit crazy. I woke up one day, I was homicidal, I was suicidal, and I was scared to death. And I called my wife my first wife, and I said, I'm going to the psych ward. I ran to the hospital as fast as I could, and I checked myself in. And, you know, it took me another 2.5 years of still out there just fighting this thing until I came in one night on May 27th, 2016. And, man, I sat in the back of this little old clubhouse, and there was a speaker telling her story, and I don't know what she said, but I know I felt everything she said. I sat in the back of that room squalling. And there was this one guy that he and I had done some previous work together. I met him in 2007. So now here it is, 2016. At this point, I've been sitting in recovery meetings with him for about 3 years, and I hated him. And he didn't like me either. We just didn't have a good, but he picked up a 30-year chip at the end of that meeting. And something inside me was like, maybe this guy can help you stay sober. And I mean, I'm gonna tell you, that was the turning point. I think it was like, you know, all this stuff I had against this guy, you know, I sort of just had to let it go. And I asked that man, I said, man, will you help me stay sober? And of course he was like, you know, you willing to go to any length? So I told him lie number one. I was like, absolutely, you know. But I done picked up 10 white chips in the last 7 days, or, you know, but I didn't know that this time was going to be any different. But he sent me home with some homework. He got me into some step work, and he just introduced me to a program of action. He introduced me to the fellowship. And he took me around and introduced me to a lot of people, and got me into some service work, you know. And he always taught me, you know, he said, every day you don't take a drink or a drug, he said, you're making a living amends to all those people that you've hurt. He said, every time you show up early and grab one of those readings or take out the trash, he said, you know, you're doing 12-step work. He made me feel a part of. And just no matter how little of a task it was, you know, I felt like I was a part of. And I hadn't felt that in a very long time.
It reminded me when the student is ready, the teacher appears, right?
Absolutely. I was thinking about that today. I mean, it's just, you know, one of my favorite, you know, one of the things that sponsor did for me, he introduced me to speaker tapes. Now it's Spotify, you know, but man, what a amazing tool that was for me. And I found a lot of guys that, man, I just latched on to. I liked their program. And one of them always said, he said, I had a lot of dying to do when I got here, you know, and that's me. I still had a lot of dying to do once I even got here. You know, I had a lot of dying to get here, but I still had a lot more dying to do, you know. It's just the ego deflation.
No, and me and you both, speaker tapes they're really powerful, man. They really, that's another thing, another tool that helped me. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that, you know, that's just another way to hear a good message, you know. And I learned a lot from, I don't know if you did the Joe and Charlie tapes, but those were, you know, those were kind of the original speaker tapes, so to speak. They weren't really, but I mean, as far as doing the steps and learning about the big book, and those are powerful.
Right. And that's, you know, and it's amazing. I go back through and think back on what early sobriety meant. And it was just like, I really felt like, man, it was just like things are, you know, I'm opening up, things are opening up for me. You know, it's just like somebody may grab me after a meeting and say, Jeff, here's this tape. I want you to listen to it. It was years before I found Joe and Charlie. I'd heard about them. I think the path, this old timer grabbed me. He is 32 years sober, and I called him Idaho Scott, but he was from Idaho and living in Birmingham, and remarkable recovery. And I just latched on to everything, anytime he shares something with me. But he turned me on to Scott and Bob, Scott L, Bob Darrell. And I call it the modern day Joe and Charlie or something. I don't know, but it was later on before I discovered Joe and Charlie, and I loved them. But it was just in early sobriety, man, I was so scared. Here I am. I finally want to be sober, but I'm scared to be alone. It's just like in the early days, the only time I felt safe was when I walked through the threshold of a meeting and sat down next to y'all. I mean, because it was so frightening out there on my own. And, it was, so when I'm traveling to and from to work, it was just like, hey, I pop in a tape, I listen to it. And it was just a wonderful tool. And these podcasts, it's just like, man, I hear my story in so many different ways.
No, that's really cool. So what were some of the early challenges, of getting sober,
Ceasing fighting anything, anyone, even alcohol. So my divorce had been final for about 4 months before I came back in. And I'm going to tell you, there's nobody meaner than an ex-spouse, and boy, that was my biggest challenge. And my sponsor really, he made fun of me a lot. There was one day I felt that I deserved the right to call the law because she wouldn't let me have my child one weekend. And I did all these things, and I thought, hey, now I'm going to call my sponsor and tell him what I've done. And rather than call him first before I'd done these things. And he just he chuckled. He laughed at me. He said, chalk one up for her. She got you again. And it was like, it was just like, the world and its people really dominated me. And it was just, I think that was just that point of surrender. I don't know what's best for them. I don't know what's best for me, and it was very difficult. It was just like I was one of those that I'm just full of gloom and doom, full of self-pity. I love when somebody asks me how I'm doing, because I'm going to just tell you all the bad stuff that's going on. And, and that was one of the things I stopped doing. And I said, hey, I'm probably going to tell you a lie, tell them a lie, but it was just, I started acting as if, hey, life is good, and it really didn't seem like it, but I just started uttering those words, and, and eventually life was good.
I think sometimes we act our way into different thinking. Sometimes we can think our way into different acting, but I think we have to, most of the time we have to act our way into different thinking. At least that's been my experience.
Absolutely.
Me. And I had a kind of very similar experience with someone, the mother of my child, and I was very angry, and I remember when they told me to pray for her, every day. It was like, and they pointed out, and I can't remember where it is in the book, but it's the resentment prayer. I mean, may she have everything good in her life that I would ever want for myself,
Yeah.
And I did that, it took years for me to get relief, because I wanted to hold on to that anger,
Right.
And I love how you surrendered, you let it go, that's a huge deal. That's a huge deal.
And I've learned I got to continue, life keeps throwing these things at me, things still push my buttons. And, it's, I'm grateful that I learned how to surrender. Sometimes I can surrender multiple times, and I can start my day over at any point in time that y'all told me.
Yeah.
And I need that a lot of days.
Yeah.
I can't.
I do that at least once an episode where I
There you
mute
go.
myself. But I was saying that my buddy Jimmy would always say, you don't have to ride the garbage truck all the way to the dump. You can get off anytime.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of the good things that have happened to you in sobriety?
Well, there's so many. I was 10 months sober, and only as a result of, me being in a program of recovery, and would I ever say, hey, ask my mother to take her to Nashville. She was a big country music fan, big George Jones fan. She was even into the and I always tell this story because it's just I still make fun of her. She's dead and gone now, but she was probably the president of the George Jones fan club. But only because of this program would I say, my father had passed away some years earlier, and I was like, hey, look, me and my son are going to take you to Nashville and let you spend the weekend. We'll take you out. And we went up there, and it was, I walked out to my vehicle, and it was really the first time I'd ever been tempted. And I walk out to my vehicle to grab some more luggage, and there's what appeared to be an 8-ball of cocaine sitting at the under, like it had fell out of my vehicle. And and I turned away and just walked away from it and went on inside and did what I needed to do. The next morning I woke up and went and attended a meeting, and I come back and I couldn't get my mother to answer the door. And it took me about 45 minutes before I really started panicking, and I ended up going and getting the maintenance crew, and they had to break into her room, and she had suffered a stroke. And man, I was just flooded with just wished I'd have done this, wished I'd have done that. It was just so many things came to mind, but not once did I ever think about taking a drink. I think that's one of the best things that's ever happened to me, and that's the promise that I was told, hey, if you do these things, you're going to respond, sanely. And, but it just goes on. It's just like so many more things, the restoration of mine and my son's relationship. The child was just frightened of those first few times after our divorce that he was forced to come spend the weekends with me. He was terrified of me. And most of my anger was directed at her. It was just like, I think, man, it's just the relationship that I have with that 19-year-old kid today. And, he comes to me for spiritual guidance, for, life questions. And, he's just, man. And many a times, I was on that slow suicide installment plan with drugs and alcohol. And there were many times that I just, would drink and drink and drink and just hope I never wake up again. I wanted to die. And there were times where I flat out had a gun and was ready to blow my brains out. And, and I think back on those times, and it's times like, I'm reminded, man, I almost missed this thing. I have so many beautiful things in my life today, and I don't always see it tonight when you were reading my bio and talking about my kids and stepkids, man, and I started tearing up because I got it good today, and it's only, you know, because I took some action, and I never thought it would be this way, and I'm truly grateful for that.
No, it's a big deal. And if your mom was the George Jones president of the fan club, my father was the vice president. Huge possum fan. My dad, still today, I'll call him and he'll have George Jones on playing on his radio. And I'm like, Dad, you got to turn it down. I can't hear what you're saying. So what a wonderful tribute to your mom too.
Yeah.
What a really nice thing, man. So you talked a little bit about service, but what's some of the service today that kind of helps you, helps you with your program, or what type of service are you involved in today?
Well, man, I can't say enough about what sponsorship does.
Yeah.
And just being able to give back. And it's just like, it's perfect timing every time when one of my guys call me or something like that. But, in my home group, I'm the speaker seeker. I love speaker meetings, and I've got the opportunity and, to be able to, I love that, to be able to bring people. I love going to outside meetings and going, I live just 20 miles east of Birmingham. But I love going to meetings. I've got somebody coming over, one of my friends coming over from Griffin, Georgia to speak, and it's just, that's one of the things that I really enjoy doing. I served as GSR for a few years, and then my work got crazy to where I was traveling and I wasn't able to do that much anymore. And so I love going to treatment centers and giving back and carrying the message.
Mm-hmm.
We do that once a month at a place in Birmingham, and that was another thing my sponsor got me into. And within a year sober, one of the guys, the directors, called me and says, "Hey, would you and your group like to start coming down there?" And I've been doing that for about 9 years now, and except for a little bit of COVID time where they shut down. But it's one of those things. It's like, man, it's on a Sunday night, and some nights it's tough to get there.
Yeah.
But man, I'm so grateful that I get there, and I always come back changed.
Yeah. Yeah. Once again, I did it again, Jeff. I did it again. This may be the first time I've done it twice. So yeah, there you go. But what's, for someone that's new, that may be listening, what's a sponsor kind of mean to you, or how would you explain a sponsor to somebody who maybe isn't familiar with that?
I love the term guide. My sponsor has been a guide. He's been a compass. He's been, man, that's the biggest thing. It was just like he held up a string one day and he said, your recovery. He held his fingers at the top. He pinched the top of that string. He says, your recovery's got to be first and foremost. He said, then you got your family, and he went on down the line, your hobbies, your work, whatever. He said, but if at any point, any of these other things get before your recovery, things aren't in the line. And that's been a huge thing for me is, and for my recovery is my relationship with the God of my understanding. That's huge. And it was just like, you know, just he was a guide through this spiritual journey.
Well, what is your relationship with spirituality or higher power? How did that develop for you in recovery? If you don't mind me asking.
It was, in some of the literature that I've read, it talked about, a person that once had faith and had lost it, a person who's full of faith. I'm sort of one of those. I heard it in a meeting one time that, talking about being religiously arrogant. There was a time when I walked into the rooms and I was a little bit, if you don't believe what I believe, you're wrong. So I'm a recovering Baptist is another thing I've heard people say. You know, I I really had to become open minded. My sponsor pointed out to me. He says, they've been sober 15 years. Something's working for them, right? And it's just, I think I gained the most freedom when I allowed other people to have their own conception of God. That was the area that was a hang up for me. I, you know, and I found so much freedom in that. But, it's just, I learned practical applications in recovery of how, it was just like, hey, rolling out of bed and asking God to help me stay sober today. And if I stayed sober, to thank Him at the end of the night. And I've learned so many other prayers you guys have taught me. I did those 14 days for my ex-wife many a times. The amazing thing is I never made it to 14 days. It was gone somewhere at 6 days or whatever. And it's just, it's the evidence when I do these things, and the evidence that I get the results. And that's just, it was frightening to take some of these steps of faith. And, but I saw remarkable things happen, and it's just like, hey, I want more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, the proof is in the pudding. That's what my old sponsor used to say. Proof is in the pudding. Um, what what's one of your favorite recovery tools? Like what's kind of your go-to?
I'm gonna have to go to speaker tapes and podcasts. I mean, and I refer to, uh, I love reading. I love reading some of the old literature. And some of the old stuff, and it's just. But I would say my go-to is the speaker tapes. There's so many that I listen to, and it's just like, hey, if I'm dealing with something, I know, hey, I can go over here and listen to this, and and somehow hear what I need to hear. I love being in meetings. My sponsor always used the phrase when I was going through something tough. He'd be like, Jeff, as long as you put yourself in God's world, everything's going to be okay. And my perception of that was, get your butt to a meeting. And it's just like, man, I hunker down and I become open-minded, and I learn how to listen here, and it's just like I hear what I need to hear. It may get me through 5 minutes. It may get me through a day, but that's a great tool.
So what would you say to somebody who might be listening who feels like they're hopeless?
I'm going to rob another one of my sponsors' phrase. He says, Jeff, because I started sponsoring guys and they would drink, relapse, whatever. And he was like, Jeff, as long as they're breathing, there's hope. And I firmly believe that. I've been in some of the darkest places, they were very dark to me, and it's just like, I love the phrase, oh, how dark it is before the dawn. It's just like, I've hit some major bottoms, but the only thing I did right was just keep coming back, keep showing up. And, again, just so many things because, man, I almost missed this thing, but it's just, it goes back to faith. Uh, what seemed like a flimsy reed, I couldn't understand how what you guys what they were suggesting is going to work for me. I didn't see how that was a solution, but it was just like Bob D shares something. He said, you can have this belief or this hope that that guy can push that wheelbarrow across that tightrope across the Grand Canyon. But if you trust, you'll jump in the wheelbarrow. And that's the place I had to get into. Contempt prior to investigation. That was the nicest way anybody ever told me to shut my mouth until you try. And it was just like that. That's that's a that's the way I feel. It's just like, man, I needed to shut my mouth and just try. And I one guy by the name of Blind Jim, he's dead now, but man, he used to speak internationally, and he said he used to come to Birmingham, and I become close to him, and he grabbed me, hugged me one night. He said, Jeff, this program doesn't come to those that need it and want it. It comes to those that do it. And when I started doing what y'all were doing, my life changed.
Yeah, true story, Jeff. Well said, man. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we haven't?
Not not that I can think of. It's just nothing really comes to mind. Again, thank you for what you do. It's things like this that have, man, I get through another day.
Well, I'm honored, brother, and I really appreciate your willingness to share your story. And I can't let you go though until we do our rapid recovery questions.
Sounds good.
Don't be nervous, Jeff.
All right.
All right, my friend. What is your favorite recovery slogan?
But for the grace of God.
What is your least favorite recovery slogan?
Think.
What do you think is your sobriety superpower?
Language of the heart.
If you could say one thing to your former self, what would it be?
Keep putting one foot in front of the other.
What song do you play to lift your spirits when you need a boost?
Man, that changes from time to time. Right now, I would say a song called Numa by Tool.
I was thinking you would say a George Jones song. I couldn't think of one off the top of my head.
And I do. It's in my music, my Spotify. I do. And I'm gonna tell you, when I need a good cry, I'm gonna go to Who's Gonna Fill Their Shoes.
Oh man, nice one. What song do you? Oh no, sorry. If you could grant yourself one wish to help with your recovery, what would it be?
That's a tough one. First thing that comes to mind is more time. Just to be able to stop the world sometimes and do more.
What step do you love the most?
10.
What step do you love the least?
4. I think, none of us like the self-searching.
What is one of your favorite movies?
Braveheart.
And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome home.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for taking the time tonight, brother. It's really been a pleasure.
I appreciate it, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome, man. And for the rest of you guys out there, please subscribe to our friends at thedailyponderables.com, your recovery source for inspiration and encouragement every day. A new episode of The Cup of Joe Show is released every Thursday at noon. Visit thecupofjoeshow.net, or you can listen to the show on your favorite podcast apps, Podbean, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and others. Just search for The Cup of Joe Show. Don't forget the "the." Please like, follow, subscribe, and share, because someone out there needs to hear this today. Have a good day, everybody.
It's just a laid-back vibe, baby.
We hope you enjoyed today's Experience, Strength, and Hope. We are so grateful you decided to join us. Please share this episode with someone who might need it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, no matter where you are in your recovery journey, you are not alone. Reach up and reach out to someone. Please do not suffer in silence. Until next time, let's take it 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time. Thanks for listening to The Cup of Joe Show.